We got Jeff Dornik on again. Hello, Jeff. How are you? You're so
Doing
busy.
good.
You have a baby at home, and you've got this big baby, this Freedom First TV uh, franchise. How's it all going?
It's all going good. My sleep is down to probably about 4 hours a night, but things
Oh,
are going good, and
nice.
definitely working away and got a lot on my plate. I'm enjoying
hmm
every second.
Well, okay, that's good. Well, today I have you on. You're the CEO of Gatekeepers. For people who don't know, I'm Bobby Lopez, the host of the Big Brown Gadfly, and today we're going to talk about a fun question, which is how many times can you be burned before you realize that fire is hot? How many times can you be tricked before you realize that there are people in the world who are tricksters? And we ask this because in the conservative world, there have been growing signs that we just can't win with the team that we have. And it seems that a lot of the people who are in positions of leadership or who have influence in the conservative movement seem to have a bag of tricks that they play over and over and over again to thwart what we really want, to kind of pull us in, get our money, get our support, and then put off what we really want. And then we have this middle range of activists who just seem to never learn the lesson. So that's what we're going to talk about. I know it's an uncomfortable topic, but hopefully it will be okay. Now, just so you know, I am now on Freedom First TV. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, we're getting
Okay.
all of your episodes up on Freedom First TV.
Okay, great. Thanks. And so if you want to follow me, I have this name Bobby Tabano because my show is going to be it's on in Spanish on Brighteon TV and Espanol. I don't know when I'm going to have the permanent time slot. I think I'm in the rotation right now at this point, but the Spanish name is El Tabano de Atenas. You'll have to speak Spanish to know what that means, but that's where I can be found is Bobby Tabano on Twitter, Getter, Substack. If you comment in English, I'll answer you because I'm like that. I'm nice. Also, if you want to follow on gatekeepersonline.com, my book, Cancel Proof Christianity, Stop Complaining and Build a Civilization, is going to come out next month because I've got the last bits on that ready. Okay, so we're ready to jump into this?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Okay, so let me just ask you a sincere question, Jeff. Okay, so how many times can you be fooled? If I come to you and I say, Jeff, would you mind giving me the key to your house? I just want to have it in my pocket. I'm not going to use it, but just give me the key to your house so that in case you have an emergency and you need to be let in, I'll have it. And you give me the key to your house, and then your house gets broken into. And then you do this four times. Are you going to give me the key to your house a fifth time?
I wouldn't even get to number two, I don't think.
Okay, very good, very good. If you marry a woman and we're both married, so let's just
hmm
this is probably real. If you were to marry a woman and she cheated on you and stole all your money and ran off, and then she came back and said, "Let's get remarried," and she did that four times, are you going to marry her a fifth time?
I highly doubt that.
Okay, so we could look for biblical scriptures, but I'm just going to go under the general category of wisdom, which is always promoted in the scriptures. It's not loving to be stupid. Would you agree?
That's a pretty epic line. I think we should sell like a T-shirt or something like that
Yeah,
with
well,
that.
I started one American Thinker article with that line. It's not loving to be gullible. You can forgive someone and not give them the key to your whole platform,
Right.
right? You can be loving towards someone who has changed their mind and overcome a bad decision without following their prescriptions of which of your friends you should blacklist, right? You know, when you have a track record of someone who's betrayed you, then I think that you should act on that track record. That's kind of the point. And the reason why I bring this up is because right now, in the Southern Baptist Convention, we have a little bit of craziness, okay? And the craziness consists of this. All right, so you're familiar with the Southern Baptists, right, Jeff? I know
Yes.
you're
Yep.
not part of the Southern Baptists. So, I've been working with conservatives in the Southern Baptist world who have been fighting the wokeness in the Southern Baptist world. There's a great movie out there called Enemies Within the Church. I'll post the website of that later on. You should get that movie because this is the culmination of years of work of people who tried to trace for the average Christian so they can see how the evangelical world has been taken over by these cultural Marxists. Okay. So I generally have been functioning for the last couple of years on the idea that, okay, these conservative camps of the Southern Baptist Convention are doing good work. They're great. And then all these weird things are happening. Okay. So, at Mid America Baptist, Theological Seminary, Judge Saul's group from Enemies Within the Church gets kicked off the stage. Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary was supposed to be the conservative alternative. They get kicked off the stage. It's not really clear why. Now we have the situation where Megan Basham is a reliably conservative reporter, ostensibly, okay, at the Daily Wire. And she and other people are being platformed in that conservative Baptist network at the same conference with Al Mohler and Peter Thiel. So we'll talk a little bit about who Peter Thiel is. Charlie Kirk is being given the platform at a lot of conservative Baptist events. He's going around, the Turning Point USA founder, and he's saying that he's Christian and he's fervently Christian and he wants to be the voice of it. And then we have Rosaria Butterfield, one of the women who was very popular with Russell Moore and a lot of the liberal Christians who condemned reparative therapy and conservative and conversion therapy because she said about 10 years ago that was heretical. That was the prosperity gospel. It's sinful for a gay person to want to be straight. These are the things that she was putting out there. And so she really became the cover, the mask for all of these Baptist leaders who just told evangelicals to stand down during all of the big fights of the last 10 years: gay marriage, transgender pronouns, sex curriculum in the schools. When the Anglican Church banned conversion therapy, there were a lot of evangelical leaders who said stand down on these issues, and they usually cited her. Now she's coming out and she's saying that she has repented and she's changed her mind, and actually she wants to open up this dialogue with all these people, and she wants to get on all these shows among our conservative friends. So I'm trying to make sense of all of this. Jeff, you've had experience in the past, haven't you, with these conservative superstars who they get in, and then what usually happens when they get in?
They almost always they get in, they pretend to be conservative evangelicals, and then they get in and then they flip. It's kind of the John McCain effect, where I grew up in Arizona with John McCain as our senator, and every single election cycle he would run as a conservative, and then he would go legislate as a flaming liberal. And I feel like it's the same thing with these guys. I remember when Al Mohler, I used to go to Shepherd's Conference. I remember when Al Mohler would be up there, he'd be the most conservative person on the stage, and then he goes kind of woke and compromising and all that kind of stuff, and now he's trying to come back and be another conservative leader. And I'm just like, at what point, like you said, at what point will we learn?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that the people that I work with, they have spent 10 years documenting the problem with Russell Moore and Al Mohler and how they present a conservative face, and then behind the scenes they manipulate everything and they help the woke movement get in, often not publicly. It's not based on what the statements that they make publicly, because they usually come out of the gate saying all the right things, or they issue statements that are theologically sound, but years after it could have any assistance for our movement to protect the gospel. So the best example is the Nashville Statement to protect traditional marriage was signed by all of these lukewarm evangelicals 2 years after Obergefell was decided at the Supreme Court. I mean, there was nothing that could be done there now. So I often find that what ends up happening is we've seen enough evidence that this is a routine. This is a concerted playbook that they do. They get into conservative organizations. They want the center stage. They often come with lots of money. And then once they get in, once they get onto your platforms, once they get onto your boards, once they're in a decision-making position, they start kicking out the people that they were put in place to get rid of. Do you know what I mean? It's like the Stepford Wives. You ever seen the movie The Stepford Wives at the end, where the Stepford wife has to murder the real wife? That's basically how a lot of these things work. So let's take a look first. I'm just going to review some very recent history with you. Do you remember when Pete Buttigieg had 2 babies with his husband, and people were outraged, and everyone in the conservative world just ran headline after headline about how awful it was? Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And I don't know if you know, but a few months later, Dave Rubin did the same thing. And let's see what happened when Dave Rubin did the exact same thing that Pete Buttigieg did. All right?
and many other brand-name conservative pundits have just gone woke, mega woke. Those on the supposed front lines of the culture war, those who have denounced elementary school kids being indoctrinated with gender identity and LGBTQ propaganda, those who have denounced teachers for coming out as gay to their students on TikTok, those who claim to be fighting to preserve and protect the nuclear family, are now congratulating YouTuber Dave Rubin and his partner, who he calls his husband, after they announced that the couple had just bought some woman's eggs at a fertility clinic and are renting 2 different women's wombs as surrogates, who were then implanted with the artificially inseminated eggs to grow their children, who will thus be deprived of having a mother in their lives within hours after being born, and instead turned over to 2 gay men to raise as theirs.
Okay, so when that happened, I don't know if you remember when this controversy came out, Dave Rubin's surrogacy contract, which was indistinguishable from Pete Buttigieg's surrogacy contract. I would defy you to name me a single difference. It was the same situation. He was congratulated by The Blaze. He was congratulated by Town Hall. He was congratulated by Fox News. That's not a big surprise. He was congratulated by the Daily Wire. All of these people came out and supported him. Now, surrogacy is abortion. I don't know if you know this, but in a surrogacy contract, you harvest the eggs from one woman, you fertilize them, and then you plant them in a surrogate mother, and you have to implant many embryos and then abort a certain number of the fetuses because the woman can't give that many births. So if you're congratulating a surrogacy contract, you're congratulating homosexuality, you're congratulating the deprivation of a child of a mother or a father, and you're supporting abortion. So where did this congratulation come from? And one of the things that I found as I was looking at the different responses to this was I found this video where, I don't know if you know this guy, his name is the Incredible Lucas or whatever. He makes this statement, which I found to be really arrogant. But let me just hear what you think about this statement.
That
this is in his response to Mark Guys.
Someone is always going to point at you. It's like, well, what you're doing is the same exact thing as what you're accusing them of doing by calling it a partner in a relationship. However, at the end of the day, regardless of what Mark believes and those who believe with him, Mark Dice is a relic of the past, okay? When it comes to Republicans, when it comes to conservatives, he's a relic of the past. Has a whole bunch of antiquated notions that are no longer prominent or relevant within the party. Now, you can take that however you will and find a new party or create your own new party, but these beliefs are not attached with the current Republican Party, with the conservative movement currently.
Okay, so first of all, just on a basic factual level, do you think that Lucas gets it right that Mark Davis is antiquated?
No, I mean, unless antiquated means biblical, and then I'd prefer to be antiquated and be biblical. Like this is the thing, when he's saying that this is not the party. Essentially the Republican Party. To a certain degree, I would argue that he's correct on that standpoint. He's wrong when it comes to that this is not conservatism, because conservatism is rooted in Scripture. The problem is that we've got the libertarians that have hijacked the Republican Party. I would argue that the Republican Party he's correct on, conservatism he's wrong about, and just as proof of that, according to Teddy Daniels, who was just on both my show and Chad Caton's show the other day on Freedom First TV, he's told us that from inside sources that Donald Trump is vetting Rick Grinnell to be his vice presidential candidate for 2024. And I remember when Rick Grinnell was going after Lauren Witzke for taking the truly biblical perspective on homosexuality, and he basically said, if that's what you believe, you have no place in the Republican Party. And to a certain degree, he's probably correct today because of how libertarian and how atheistic the Republican Party's become.
Although, I mean, I am with you 100%, Jeff. True. On the other hand, we have this. Let me play this news about what happened when the Democrats put forth a vote in the House of Representatives to codify into federal law the right to same-sex marriage, which the Supreme Court gave them in Obergefell versus Hodges.
Just approved legislation to protect same-sex and interracial marriages. Some lawmakers fear those rights could be overturned by the Supreme Court, which last month reversed Roe v. Wade that had secured a woman's right to abortion. CBS reporter Natalie Brand is live in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Natalie.
And Ryan, just ahead of this vote earlier this afternoon, there was a demonstration for abortion rights that a number of Democratic lawmakers took part in. And Capitol Police say 17 members were actually.
Okay, so the thing that I want to point out there, Jeff, is are you aware of how many Republicans voted with the Democrats in the House of Representatives?
Wasn't it like 40 something?
It was 47. Now that it's a glass half empty, half full. You could say, oh my gosh, I can't believe 47 Republicans voted for gay marriage. But stop. 5 years ago, they wouldn't have even wanted that vote to get onto the floor of the House of Representatives. They would have done anything they could to not have to vote for it. Out of a conference of 218 Republicans, only 47 were willing to support gay marriage, which everyone thought was a done deal, right? So now we could talk about how that's probably a fake vote because they know that it's not going to make any difference because the Democrats have the majority anyway. But I think that kind of betrays that it kind of goes against what Lucas was saying. Mark Dice is still the voice of the Republican base. Do you see what I'm saying? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that with the Republican base, correct. When it comes to the Republican leadership and the Republican political leaders and elected officials and GOP officials and all of that, maybe not. And I think that comes back to the disconnect between the leadership of the party and the base of the party. And I think there's that disconnect there. And to where I think Mark Dice represents the people. And then what's his name, Lucas or whatever it is, his voice is more of that of the GOP leadership, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to try to pull Trump out. I mean, I feel like Trump is this floating signifier, as they would say in English departments. He's this constantly changing symbol. I don't know from day to day what he symbolizes. I think for a lot of evangelicals, he symbolized the fighter who is going to fight for these traditional values that have been neglected. But at the same time, he's also like the guy who's going to make Rick Grinnell the vice president, and he's going to try to force that agenda down our throats. So, you see that moving in all these different directions. But I think at the core of it, what we've seen in the last, I'm going to say 18 months is things have changed in terms of what Mark Dice was saying. I think it still is a majority of the base, both of the Republican Party, and I think that is the majority of the feeling of church-going Christians. And part of this is because they've seen the drag queen story hour. They've seen the little kids being brought to nightclubs where gay strippers are taking money from them. They've seen the curriculum in the schools. They've seen these transgender surgeries performed on 15-year-olds and 4-year-olds being socially transitioned. They've seen the excesses. They're alarmed as all heck. I think that there is a growing feeling among a lot of church-going Christians that the Lord is judging our country, which is why we're going through all these problems, right? And so at this moment, it almost seems like for you to put forward the idea that we need to be a pro-LGBT or to compromise on that issue, it's like snatching victory or defeat from the jaws of victory. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're at the moment when we could go in and just spike the ball. The donor class is there manipulating people at all these different levels to try to get them to believe that somehow it's still the year 2016 and the way forward is just to assume that everything's going pro-gay ad infinitum, and it's not going pro-gay. Do you see what I'm saying? So let's talk now about this decision among conservative Baptists. These are people this is not the crazy woke Baptists that we always like to complain about. These are the people who are friends with Todd Starnes, okay? These are the people who are, they're promoting Megan Basham, and they're trying to fight against the woke agenda, and they're working with Charlie Kirk, and they're working with Peter Thiel. So let's talk a little bit about those two figures and what we see from them. This is Peter Thiel. I'm going to share another video. This is Peter Thiel at the 2016 Republican Convention. Okay.
I am proud to be gay. I am proud to be a Republican. But most of all, I am proud to be an American.
Okay, now I want to make clear that I don't really have a big issue with Peter Thiel in his adult life having being involved in adult relationships. That's his choice. But as we can see, the movement for him to have his consensual relationships and to be proud to be gay, it is impossible to pull that apart from what they're doing with kids. Would you agree with that? You can't have one without the other. And ultimately, if on our platforms we're going to criticize the movement to sexualize young children, if we're going to look at grooming, if we're going to look at pedophilia and the organized pedophilia in the form of sex trafficking and the LGBT curriculum in the schools, someone like Peter Thiel at some point is going to feel uncomfortable. Would you agree? At some point, he's going to be sitting there and he's just going to feel like, what am I doing here? Why am I giving my money to these people who are attacking my right to have children in the future, or who are looking at me with doubts? Even if I go and I say, look, it's not you. I have a problem with Drag Queen Story Hour. At some point, we're going to step on his toes. And then he's going to say, look, if you want to keep on getting my money, you're going to have to tone this down. You're going to have to, don't have Bobby Lopez speaking. See if you can get him out of that seminary so that we can just have these other speakers who are more palatable to me. Does that sound familiar to what you've seen go on in the movement, Jeff?
Well, yeah, and I think I want to say this too, because I've met Dave Rubin a couple of times and talked to him and things like that. I don't necessarily have a problem with gay people being in the GOP or in the Republican Party or things like that. What I have a problem with is when they are allowed to manipulate what it means to be a conservative, manipulate what it means to be a conservative Christian, and redefine what we believe, and then people gobble it up and go right along with that. And I think that that's where we as Christians need to be stronger about this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, if we want to partner with Peter Thiel or Dave Rubin on free speech, I'll do it all day long. But as soon as we get into those areas where we disagree theologically, where we disagree on homosexuality, there is no partnership, and that's where we have to be firm and not be apologetic. And so, but to your point though, with somebody like Peter Thiel, who's got a lot of money, throws a lot of money around, both in the Republican Party, both within the conservative movement and within Christianity, we have to understand that oftentimes people are willing to compromise as long as there's a paycheck that goes along with it. And pastors, theologians, seminary leaders, Christian leaders are not immune to that. I think a lot of times we think that they are, and we trust them that, hey, they're going to make the right decision no matter what. But when you have somebody coming in and offering to donate $100,000, $300,000, $500,000 to your organization, as long as you don't talk about these three things, there's a lot of people will compromise on that.
Well, right. And Peter Thiel, for those of people who don't know, he was one of the founders of PayPal. So he's a man of incredible resources. He's got a lot of money. And so it's one thing to say, okay, let's work together on the things that we agree on. But this is at the GOP convention, and he's leading by saying, I'm proud to be gay.
Right.
And then, you feel like you're in the audience. If you don't cheer, you feel like you're betraying this person, and this person's funding you. I just think that to partner with them on the level that people are doing, it sends a mixed message, but it's also, you're partnering with someone who is not going to be able to sustain the support for your whole agenda for the long haul. And it's a problem. And then we get into even deeper trouble when we get into Charlie Kirk, because he has a history not only of supporting some of these unbiblical positions, but he also persecutes and fires people. There was one firing at Turning Point USA that was only 2 months ago at the end of May. So this is not ancient history, okay? He fires people who he deems are not sufficiently supportive. So I want to show you this clip of this. I don't know if you've probably seen this video. This is from 2019, when there were people who were asking, why are you promoting this sexual agenda within the conservative tent, and how long is this going to go on? So let me show you this one, and then we'll talk about it.
I think you need to find one.
Much more quick than him. I will. Somebody outside a protester was asking about the term culture war. It's got a long history, started late 1800s, Otto von Bismarck, Culture Kampf. In the late 1990s, mid-1990s, it was reclaimed by conservatives, one of those being E. Michael Jones, who actually started this magazine, Culture Wars magazine, and because of his fantastic work, we now understand. Thank you. Give it up.
Okay, I just want to say I'm not into E. Michael Jones. He's got some crazy ideas, but let's just bear with this guy and listen to the rest of what he says and how the response comes, because I think that it's significant.
Because of E. Michael Jones' groundbreaking work, we now understand that sexual liberation is political control. It's a form of political control. And you have multiple times advocated on behalf of accepting homosexuality, accepting homosexual acts as normative in the conservative movement. How does anal sex help us win the culture war?
I'm going to let the gay man answer.
Wait a minute. So can I ask you a question? Can you have the balls to ask the gay man on the stage that question and don't defer to him? Ask me that question. I will answer you that question.
I'm
going to answer you. You already asked the question, so I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to ask you that question. This is America. This is the greatest freaking nation in the world. We realize that America is great because we have Western values. We realize that, let me finish, dude. We realize that gays and lesbians are able to contribute to American society in the same way that everybody else is. And let me tell you, when you continue doing that, okay, you realize that we are here. We are able to do everything. And let me tell you something as well. I served in the military, right? I served 5 years. I did an Iraq tour. What's up?
How does homosexual sex help us win the culture war?
Who said homosexual sex helps you win the culture war?
That's the question that I'm asking. Why are you promoting it?
Well, it's a BS question, and you know it is. It's not. It's a question that is not being. It's not a good faith question.
So I'm going to be honest.
Good faith question.
Rob, honestly, I don't care what two consenting adults do. So that's
the whole thing.
And your hyper focus on it is kind of weird. Thanks for being
you
here.
seem to be really interested in gay sex. I'm pretty sure if you're into that, you can go find somebody to do it with. I don't know, maybe. Next question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Mr. Kirk.
And wait a minute, let me. This is my first culture war, so I want to say that I have to make a statement. And I'm not here to tell anybody what to think or what to believe, but for me, somebody like that doesn't really have any place in the conservative movement because it's something that is so behind the times. And you can boo and you can do whatever you want to, baby, because I'm going to be me, and I'm still here.
Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay, so let me ask you first, what do you make of that?
See, that's the to me is the same problem that I had with Rick Grinnell when he went after Lauren Witzke. It's the same kind of response, and it's very dismissive, and it's no longer just we can tolerate each other. It's now you have to accept me, and you have to reject your antiquated views, which are biblical views, but you have to reject your religious beliefs in order to accept me. Otherwise, you're no longer in the conservative movement. The problem that we have is you've got somebody like Charlie Kirk. You've got all of these guys. They are not actually conservatives. And you and I have talked about this many times. They're definitely they're libertarian. And the problem is the libertarians have hijacked the Republican Party under the name and pretend to be conservative, when in reality, they're nothing more than atheistic libertarians that reject God, reject the Bible.
Yeah, there's so many things that I want to say on this. The first thing is that when you're taking this leader, Charlie Kirk made his name in secular conservative politics, and now you're bringing him into the church, and all signs indicate that he's taking his brand and just spray painting it over evangelical Christianity. I understand that he says that now he's a very fervent Christian. There are tons of people who say that behind the scenes he's changed his mind on LGBT ideology. From what I just saw, he basically was with this other person on the stage. He didn't want to answer the concerns, that was a legitimate concern. The only thing that they seem to try to dismiss him with is the anal sex reference, which that's a reality. That is part of, we wouldn't be worried about AIDS or monkeypox if it weren't for the fact that homosexuality means that people have the liberty, and we're encouraging them to engage in those acts. And he dismisses it, and he's totally fine with Rob Smith up there on the stage saying these people have no place in the conservative movement. There's nothing that I've seen that would counter the fear that Charlie Kirk is going to employ the same methodology as he brings into this funding and this organizational structure into the Christian world. It's like, it works like clockwork. You and I have talked about the case of Denise McAllister and the case of so many other people. The gay movement is brought in, and at first it's just, let's coexist, which I am fine with. I will work with gay people. I will work with pro-gay people. I will work with everyone as long as they don't limit me or fire me or try to squash me. And what I have seen in the conservative movement and in the Christian evangelical movement is that one always leads to the other. The gays get in, and the people who are deemed anti-gay have to get out. I was fired, right, by a Baptist seminary as they were making these overtures. And lo and behold, Enemies Within the Church gets thrown out of Midwestern America Baptist Theological Seminary at the same time that the Conservative Baptist Network is trying to bring in Peter Thiel and Charlie Kirk. Okay, so it's not a good sign, and it worries me. The question that I want to ask conservatives and conservative Christians is, how many times are you going to be fooled? How many times? I am dealing with people on my side who are sympathetic to my cause, who they have years of working with this movement and realizing how often we hear about rhinos, we hear about, squishy conservatives and fearful pastors. How many times, if you're going to complain about that, and you know the tricks that they pull, you know the games they play, you know how they sell out for money, how many times are you going to do that before you realize this? And it leads me to ask, is it possible that we just can't win with this team? Now, the last chapter in this deals with Rosaria Butterfield. Now, Jeff, I'm trying to convey to people that are working with us that when you do something like make the movie that Judge Saul made, Enemies Within the Church, you have to understand the power of that, to just put that film out there and to put it into churches. That terrifies people in power. And that terrifies people like El Moeller and Rosaria Butterfield, who was very much tied into that power structure. They're not going to just sit back and take it, right? I mean, what do they usually do when they're threatened?
I mean, they work behind the scenes in
Yes.
order to silence it, get churches to not pick it up, tell magazines, blogs, websites, don't write about it, ignore it. Because the thing is that their strategy is, the longer we can ignore it and not give it any credibility at all, it'll just be this fringe movement over here and won't break into mainstream conservative Christianity.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that we know that. We've seen it happen again and again and again. You don't have an excuse for falling for this. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell people that I know. So Rosaria Butterfield, at the end of June, she posted this retraction on her website. You had to kind of look to find it. It was forwarded to me by one of the people in our circle, because apparently what her people have done is they've forwarded it to selective individuals. And on her website, she says that she's retracting the fact that she called conversion therapy a heresy. Now, this is a very hot issue, because conversion therapy is one of a number of names that people give for a kind of counseling where you basically go to someone who's struggling with homosexuality, who doesn't want to act on those desires, and you try to help them to become a biblically oriented person, which basically means being heterosexual. Okay, if you don't have the complete absence of sexual instincts, your sexual instincts should at least be channeled towards a healthy expression of it, which is in a heterosexual context. Now, of course, the gay movement hates that, because that totally undoes the born this way theory. It undoes the idea that you can't change. It undermines their whole rhetoric that you're going to try, you will kill yourself if you try to change, etc. And so there was a movement to ban conversion therapy, and it was one of the ugliest, nastiest movements, because it was at the same time that we were complaining that Russia was banning gay propaganda in schools, they were banning conversion therapy, and the penalties for banning conversion therapy were the loss of your license. I mean, you could be driven out of your job, you could be unemployable. It was pretty severe. And Rosaria Butterfield, around 2012, she comes out with a statement. Instead of defending conversion therapy, she comes out with a statement saying that it is heresy. And she's saying this as Exodus International is being dismantled, as the laws are being pushed in state after state and after state. And she doesn't do anything to help people to defend conversion therapy. In 2017, I go to York, England, and the Anglican Church bans conversion therapy. They even ban prayers that could sound like conversion therapy in all of their Anglican churches and schools. And these folks in the Southern Baptist Convention that were being platformed, they were nowhere to be seen. They were not part of that movement at all. They didn't defend conversion therapy. 2018, I put a resolution into the Southern Baptist Convention defending conversion therapy. I'm called into by the president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, who at that time was Jeff Bingham, and I'm threatened, and a year later I'm fired because of this. She didn't stand up for me. She didn't get involved in the case. She was going around doing her books, being completely well supported and cushioned and protected because, she was the favorite ex-lesbian speaker, because she was someone who could appeal to the masses, but she was never going to require that they actually do anything, right? I mean, she was perfectly useless, and she was a great cover. And she did this for year after year. Now it's 2022, and because of Judd's movie, and because of all the events, it's not quite so easy to be off taking this position that she took. It's not, she has a motive to try to all of a sudden pivot and reposition herself. And there's people in my circle who are rejoicing. They're like, oh my goodness, we have she actually changed her mind. This is so wonderful. So I email her, and I couldn't get her personal email because she wouldn't let people give me her personal email. So I emailed her assistant, and I said, I'd love to have a conversation. You know how I am, Jeff. You've seen my interviews. I'm not combative. I'm not mean. So I said, here's some of the interviews I've done. I'd love to be able to talk to you. I get a message back from her assistant saying, oh, Ms. Butterfield gets a lot of requests. Her schedule can't accommodate you. But yet she's calling John Harris and Judd Saul, but she doesn't have time to talk to me. Obviously, I mean, I hate to conjecture here, but it's because she can't answer the questions that I would pose her. She can manipulate these other people. I mean, how many times do you have to be fooled? Do you know what I'm saying? Before you figure out, it's like, how many times do you have to touch the stove before you realize it burns your finger? I don't know. I mean, how can we win with this team? What do you think? Is it possible for us to move forward with people who they fall for the same trap again and again and again?
I mean, the answer, in my opinion, is no. But there's this parallel that's going on between what's going on in the Republican Party and what's going on in evangelicalism. And one of the things that we saw with President Trump that I think actually exposed this kind of mindset and this kind of thinking is up until Trump won the primary, a lot of the conservative movement absolutely hated him. Like, absolutely hated him. He's the worst person. He's as anti-Christian as you can possibly get. He's a Democrat in hiding. They threw so many accusations against him. But then, as soon as he became the nominee, all of a sudden, all those same conservatives that were typically Ted Cruz supporters or Rand Paul supporters or conservatives, all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, Trump's the greatest thing since sliced bread." He fills his team, his speaker, his press secretary used to be an anti-Trumper and a never-Trumper, then became one of his biggest spokespeople. We see this time and time again. Can I actually trust that those people were actually Trump supporters during that time, or were they just positioning themselves for a job to get in front of the cameras and all of that? The same thing's happening in evangelicalism. Right. When the tides are going towards wokeism, all these people will go and become more woke. When things are trending back towards conservative values and conservatism, they will all of a sudden come back and become conservative. We see this time and time again. I mean, we saw this when it came to Trump. We see this when it comes to conservative values, when it comes to homosexuality. You could just go down the list. During Trump's reign as president, a lot of these people were anti-Trump, and they were completely woke and all that kind of stuff. Now, all of a sudden, they're flipping, and they're going the complete opposite direction within a matter of a year, 2 years.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
Well, it's because Florida passed the anti-grooming law. Virginia had the election where the LGBT grooming in the schools became a big issue. The tide has turned to a certain degree, and now they're trying to reposition themselves. Look, I am not someone who's going to say that if someone made a mistake, you have to define them by that forever. People could change their mind. They can evolve, all right? That doesn't mean you're going to put them on a platform. It doesn't mean if Peter Thiel says, okay, you know what, I'm going to give you all this money, make sure that this movie doesn't get shown at the seminary. It doesn't mean you go ahead and do that like an idiot, because it is idiotic to do that. You just brought up the Trump administration. Look how that ultimately ended. All of those people around him didn't have his back. He was impeached twice over nothing. They're still having these hearings in Congress over the January 6th hearings. I believe they stole the election from him, and all of those people told him to stand down. They absolutely did not protect him, and they didn't protect the base. And, you know, a lot of his agenda got derailed because he got into office and he hired all these people who were tied to the Heritage Foundation, and they tried to make the whole issue about lowering corporate taxes again, which is what we hear every cycle. And they never get to these social issues that are so important to evangelicals. He brought us Betsy DeVos, who instead of dealing with all the LGBT curriculum in school, she wanted to give everybody vouchers. That was her drum that she kept on beating and beating again. And so, you know, I think that it is not a question of saying we can't forgive these people or we can't have conversations with them. It's a matter of, you know, you just have to be able to protect the flock. These are people who have done serious, serious damage. They've destroyed people's lives because this decadence, this cultural insanity, it happened under the gaslighting regime that they perpetuated. And, you know, it's one thing to say, well, okay, we can forgive you, let's bring you in. It's another thing to put them on the platform and to not have other people. I think the most telling sign is the fact that they won't talk to certain people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because
you know what I'm saying? Like,
to me, with Butterfield specifically, it's like if she truly had repented and changed her mind, you would think that she would be running to go talk to you specifically, over a lot of the other people that you're saying that she's reaching out to.
Right.
Like, why would she be afraid to reach out to you unless she knows that she would get exposed as being a fraud? That's the only explanation that I could actually come up with.
Right. Well, I think that the ultimate answer to that is just that it fits a pattern. You know, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, after a certain point, it's a duck. It's not like this is our first time at the rodeo. All these people have shown their true colors. I think at a certain point, Jeff, I hate to say this, but, you know, in my journey through conservatism, very often I've said, look, the people are good and we have to do this for the people. But at a certain point, though, it's like, if you can't see this, if you get burned again and again and again, I don't know. I think people like you and me, we can continue to do podcasts. We can continue to be out here in the wilderness and do the work that we do. And I think we should. But I don't think we can let it get to us, you know, to demoralize us, because ultimately we know what's going to happen. We've seen this movie before. Right now, we are in such a strong position historically because of the fact that the people are waking up. They're angry at the socialism coming out of the Biden White House. They're on our side on these social issues. They're on our side on especially the LGBT stuff. And the people who are at the top, instead of riding that wave, I feel like they're going against the current. They're pulling out these talking points from 5 years ago when we were truly desperate. You know what I'm saying? And it makes me question whether Trump is really the right person to bring into the mix, because I mean, he was, for the time, he was the right guy because, you know, we didn't have anyone championing anything. Now it sounds like he's just trying to bring Rick Grinnell and, you know, Peter Thiel back into the mix. And that's not what we need right now. We need what DeSantis, we need to be fighting head on. And I don't want to open up the discussion about gay marriage again. I want to talk about sex abuse in the gay community. I want to talk about grooming. I want to talk about the fact that they have banned counseling for same-sex abuse survivors who are questioning their sexuality because of the abuse. I want to talk about those really important issues and the transgender transitions among young people, the child abuse in these gay adoptive couples. I want to talk about those things. And I want to fight against the fact that the LGBT movement has stifled discussion. But I think that we're in a situation where with this team, we're just not going to get anywhere. I mean, do we just need a new team, or what do you think?
I think it comes back to, and Denise McAllister talks about like your identity all the time, and I think that this is one of those things that I think that we need to wake up about is where is our identity? Is our identity in the Republican Party? Is it in mainstream evangelicalism? Is it in the Southern Baptist Convention? Because if our identity is in those things, we can be pushed to and fro along with the trends and along with the leaders, and we'll follow along because hey, it's a team sport. We've got to stick together with the Republican Party so that way we can defeat the Democrats. Well, at a certain point, when you keep electing John McCain after John McCain after John McCain after John McCain, at a certain point, you got to realize maybe my identity is in the wrong place. Maybe we should put our identity into our actual belief system and then support the people that believe what we believe, as opposed to trying to adjust our beliefs or tolerance levels or whatever it is based upon the group think that we find ourselves members of. And I think to me that's the danger that we find ourselves in moving forward. If we're actually going to make a difference, we've got to stop being followers of the big group that are obviously heading in the wrong directions. Come back, figure out, what do you believe? What do you believe about homosexuality? What do you believe about abortion? What do you believe about Christianity, conversion therapy, whatever it is? What do you believe? And then follow that. Stop following these fallen leaders that are just leading everybody astray.
Yeah, I think you ended on such a good note. I really want to thank you for that. I just want to real quick talk about two important things that you can support to go along with what my brother here just said. There are places where you can put your efforts. One of which is this effort. This is at it's called Equipping the Persecuted, and this is a website. It's at equippingthepersecuted.com. Let me get rid of this caption so that you can see it. And if you go there, just look up the website, Equipping the Persecuted. They are going and defending persecuted Christians in Nigeria, one of the places in the world where it is extremely dangerous to be Christian. And I think it's a wonderful effort. Also, enemies within the church is, you just go to Enemy, get this movie. This is something where I would say invest your money into this, because this is a movie that really shows you what the threat to our belief system is, why we have to fight it, and how to be on the lookout against false shepherds, basically, because they're out there. Not everyone in the world is sincere. And remember what I opened up with, to be loving is not to be gullible. Thank you so much, Jeff. And I look forward to being on you again. Remember, Freedom First TV. Follow me on Getter, Substack, or Twitter. Bobby Tabano is my name on those sites. And also, you can follow me at gatekeepersonline.com. Thank you so much for a great show.